Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Sunday morning's roundtable discussion. I'm streaming live from California. It's about 9 a.m. here. That's why I say good morning. Ian Kummer is joining us from a suburb in Moscow. It is not morning in Moscow. What time is it, Ian?
It's 8 p.m. here.
So it's evening. Thank you for staying up for us. I'm not sure what time you usually go to bed. It's probably not before 8 p.m. Daryl Cowley is our other interlocutor, and he is streaming live from Florida, and he is in the midst of a storm. I mean, it storms a lot this time of year in Florida. It's not quite a hurricane, but it's pretty bad. And so we have a secondary plan set up in case his power goes out. He'll just jump on his phone. But so before we get to the introduction,
Billy Bob, you're cutting out really bad.
Introduce the show. So our top. Oh boy.
Oh no.
Already had technicalities. So our topic, our title is: Will Trump attack Iran for? How am I breaking up?
Yeah, Billy Bob, why don't you troubleshoot and I'll just step in for you while you're troubleshooting.
Okay.
Yeah, so
step on in.
We're here with Daryl. Daryl's going to introduce himself in a second here, but the main thing we're going to talk about is Israel and the alleged influence over U.S. politics. And it's tied in with, Trump's rhetoric against Iran this week. But Daryl in particular is going to talk about the 9/11 connection, because 9/11 is the casus belli, the justification for U.S. policy for the past 25 years. And he's going to talk about what he thinks actually happened pertaining to that. So Billy Bob, you doing okay now? Did that tick up?
You tell me. Am I breaking up or am I okay?
You seem okay, right? You're iffy. I'll say iffy.
Yeah, well, let's let Daryl just give a quick introduction. So Daryl joined us 2 weeks ago on our premiere Sunday morning roundtable episode, and so he's back this Sunday again. But tell us a little bit about yourself, Daryl.
So I'm sort of a third positionist. I don't really fall in line with a lot of the Marxist theory that you guys sort of subscribe to, but there is a lot of overlap, and I think a lot of headway could be made as far as our position today in America and in the world, sort of making a coalition between the things that we do agree with. I'm into international relations and geopolitics the same way y'all are, and we've had a lot of good conversations off stream, just online, that I found very valuable. And even though we have disagreements, we all try to be as cordial, polite, and as friendly as possible. And I think as long as we maintain sort of open dialogue, open communication, I think that's really what I appreciate about you the most, Billy Bob, is that you don't like to shut down people or conversations that you necessarily disagree with. So I think that's extremely important, that in this country we do have the right to speech, and that right is there to protect not comfortable speech but uncomfortable speech. And I think you can't really make progress without that. So I do appreciate you having me on and the conversations that we do have.
Well, thank you so much. And I agree. It is important, I want to hear the best arguments. I want to hear what people really think, and I want to understand why they think that way, because without that kind of understanding, you can't convince people, or you can't be yourself convinced. So I get that you're confused, and I'm here to help. So I appreciate that. That's not true. Some people like to, have no interest in actually discussing disagreements. And I think it's a great thing to identify disagreements, get to the heart of the disagreement, and just be transparent and open and honest about the things. It's difficult. It's a challenge. It's a communication challenge to really drill down to the core disagreement and figure out, what exactly, because it's like, you tell me what you think, and then I hear that in my mind, and then my mind is like, it's not exactly what is in your mind. It's as close as it can be based on what you said, but there's still, it's just, communication itself is a struggle. And then when people aren't even interested in effective communication, there's just no hope in coming to an understanding. And so this is great practice. It's great. We're going to communicate here. So this is, a very important topic, and a lot of people share your view, I think, on these kinds of things. It's very common, very popular to hear that Israel is, dictating U.S. policy, and the government is owned by the Israel lobby. These are all very common, typical things, and so it's an interesting discussion to have. Where should we start, though? Maybe Ian knows.
Well, why don't we tie it in with current events, and then I'll pass it on to our guest, Daryl, to talk about what he was prepared to talk about. So, in the news, it's been reported, I think it was Reuters who broke the story. It was either Reuters or AP who broke the story that the Trump administration, the U.S. government, the War Department is preparing for quote unquote a multi-week operation in Iran, and that coincides with Netanyahu's latest visit. I think it's more. Yes, it's definitely more than any other head of state. He has visited and personally met with Trump more than any other head of state, which is interesting because Israel is not formally a U.S. ally. We call them an ally, but they are not a member of NATO. They do not have any official military or political, no set in stone, written down alliance like NATO members do, because we're official allies with France, with Britain, with these other countries, but not with Israel. But he has visited the USA more than any other head of state, and Trump has met with him more than any other head of state. And so people are wondering, what kind of leverage does Israel have over the USA?
Yeah. Well, going off that, I think if you look at the special envoy that Trump has of Witkoff and Jared Kushner as well, that special envoy doesn't just deal with the Iran portion of this. They're out there speaking to Zelensky. They're out there speaking to countries in the EU. They're speaking to the heads in Turkey. And you'll notice as well, I saw something recently that's quite revealing. Whenever the special envoy leaves from the United States to go speak to these other nations, they always stop in Israel first, and then they'll go to their destination. And then on the way back to America, they'll stop in Israel and then go back to America. So I don't think you can sort of gloss over the fact that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, he's the guy that's sort of leading the new Gaza development. And Steve Witkoff, a Jewish real estate mogul from New York. Obviously, they have ethnic ties to the state of Israel. They're Zionists. So if those are your guys that you're sending out to not just deal with Iran, but the rest of the world, I think that really ties that ethnic tie to Israel sort of is at the heart of our foreign policy there. What else I'm stuck on the special envoy. You had said something else, Ian.
Well, it was kind of an open-ended question to you. What kind of leverage does Israel have?
Leverage. Okay, so Epstein. What is Epstein? That's where we just got 3 million documents, hilariously redacted. Some of them like partially redacted. I'm sure you guys saw that they tried to redact everything with DON.
Yes.
For Donald, so words like "don't" were being redacted, just that portion of it. So the cover-up's pretty hilarious. And also they released an official list, an Epstein list yesterday, the DOJ did, that there's some funny names on there. Cher is implicated in this. A lot of funny names. But I also noticed a lot of names that I personally read and looked into weren't on the lists. Specifically, the Rothschild family, who Epstein said he was a representative of. He said to Peter Thiel, he said, "I represent the Rothschilds," and they conveniently were left off the list that the DOJ released yesterday. And the leverage that Israel has over the United States. I mean, I think Epstein. There's sure many more networks and sort of point people that run these Israeli influence operations through blackmail and through bribery, financial deals. But if you have a man like Epstein who received his original funding from people like Leslie Wexner, Ron Lauder. He's working with Ehud Barak and multiple Israeli intelligence agents, and he's running a hidden camera blackmail operation on the behalf of Israeli officials and Israeli nationals and Israeli loyalists. That's obviously they're going to use that blackmail as leverage for the sake of Israel. And I think we're being exposed to what the past like multiple decades have been about, whether it's foreign policy, whether it's foreign aid, whether it's tech deals and intelligence operations. I think this Epstein email drop is really shining a light on a lot of what's happening behind the scenes.
You want to tie 9/11 into that?
Yeah, sure. Well, conveniently enough, all right. So I actually looked up. There's a streamer named Ian Carroll. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's done a lot of good work on this Epstein network as well as other things. And he actually created an AI database system. What would you call it? A crawler?
An AI model.
An AI model, sure. And basically what it allows you to do is upload all the files, and then there's AI built in, and you can ask the AI things, but instead of using sources from from the internet, where if you ask ChatGPT, Grok, any of these other AIs, they're going to be pulling from the New York Times. Yeah. They're going to be pulling from the Washington Post. Next thing you know, Epstein's a Russian agent of Putin, which is hilarious because I keep seeing that. But no, this AI model is pulling directly from the files. And something that I noticed while using this software yesterday, because I was playing around with it for like an hour or two, I was like, what specific, is there any specific things that have been left out or seem to be missing in these files? All right. And this is crazy, is that the AI actually gave me a timeline of like 1990 to 2023. And you can see the emails and the time span that they were sent. And so you have like, it gets bigger and bigger each year because obviously he was emailing more as his operation grew. But there is a gap between 1999 and 2001 where almost no emails exist in the Epstein emails. So that makes me think, obviously, by my own research and understanding, a lot of his friends and partners were part of the original 9/11, whether it was the demolition, the cover-up, the planning of it. They were, a lot of his partners and associates were part of that. But in the emails themselves, the 1999 to 2001, there were almost no emails, which is kind of curious. So what did Epstein have to do with 9/11, 2001? So I don't think we're going to get any answers from the DOJ and Pam Bondi, honestly, on that. She doesn't seem to be wanting to answer too many questions. She'd rather divert and like just personally attack people on irrelevant things. And she's not.
Dow is over 50,000, Daryl.
Oh man,
Why aren't you talking about that, Daryl? Why aren't you talking about the stock market, Daryl?
I know. The Nasdaq and the Dow was doing amazing. But yeah, and it's really it's hilarious because if the actual evidence and the whole story and network was exposed for what it was, I think that really is the end of the Western financial system. I mean, you have the heads of J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, all the guys are involved, and I think I mean, people are going to start making connections, and I think that's really going to have a negative effect. I think the financial system could implode from relations.
Exposing of the financial system. Maybe I'm too cynical to think that's actually going to have any consequences for them.
Well, so here's something: is that while America might not prosecute and actually like go after these financial criminals or these heads of state or whatever, I saw that a lot of nations in the EU actually are, to where they were sort of being held back by the United States previously to not look into whether it's the sex trafficking, whether it's the money laundering. They were being held back by the United States. A lot of, whether it's in England, France, Sweden, their citizens have a little more say on their government. At least it appears so. And those governments are saying, okay, we're prosecuting on our end, sort of forget the United States. We're going to go after the guys that we can go after. And that might have like a domino effect, because the billionaires are not just here, they're all over the West. So it only takes a couple of big shots to go down for the whole house of cards to go down, in my opinion.
So maybe to circle back, as our former press secretary, Jen Psaki, if you remember her.
Yeah.
To circle back, what do you think, because you mentioned it before the show started, you mentioned this in private conversation, the Israel connection to 9/11. What do you have for us on that subject?
How much time do you have is the real question.
We have all the time in the world. However much time do you need? Well, how about this? You give us give us like a concise synopsis, and we can pick it apart from there. If that makes sense.
All right. So the World Trade Center bombing was a Zionist plot to get America involved in Middle Eastern affairs that would benefit the state of Israel. Pretty much the whole orchestration of 9/11, from the planting of the explosives in the buildings to let's just start with World Trade Center building and so I have four guys that I think are instrumental in connecting Israel to 9/11. And I wrote these guys down for you. So that would be Larry Silverstein. He's the man who had the 99-year lease and signed that just prior to 9/11. And he was awarded the largest insurance payout in world history. It was $4.5 billion in insurance. That was Larry Silverstein received that. He also received another $100 million in damages from the airlines and airport security. Yeah, fun.
So he sued them. He sued them. Correct. Wow. I never knew that. Actually, never knew Silverstein. Now it's Silverstein. You say Silverstein.
Larry Silverstein. Yeah.
He took them to court and won.
Correct. So, but you'd have to know who the judge was, who the prosecutor was, and that's a little farther into my notes. But they're also one of the judge at the time. His father was actually he was part of the Israel independence, the original movement. They all have early Israeli family connections from the start.
Like the ear gun or whatever.
Yeah. The guys that originally that all formed into what we know as the IDF today, those original Israeli military groups. Funny enough, Larry Silverstein also didn't show up to work that day. He was quoted to, or he was known to have breakfast at the top of his building every single morning. And that morning, you can watch an interview that he did on 60 Minutes, where he explains that his wife had convinced him to go to a dermatologist that morning. He looks very weaselly when explaining it, and you can just judge by his body language that the man's full of it. Larry Silverstein, he's friends with every Israeli prime minister over the past 30 years. He was said to have he speaks to Bibi Netanyahu every Sunday. Ariel Sharon, Ehud Barak, they're all friends. So he has countless Israeli connections. He owned the World Trade Center building because he had this strange pulling to just want to own it. That was his thing. It's a building full of asbestos. It was worthless at the time. And it would have cost too much to demo the building. But luckily for him, some Arab terrorists just happened to fly some buildings in it, and he didn't have to spend billions of dollars in demo and remodels. So lucky for him. There was another guy, Frank Lowy. He was the owner of the mall at the World Trade Center building. He was also a member of the Golani Brigade and fought in the Israeli War of Independence as well. A lot of these guys did. He funded and launched the Israeli Institute for National Strategy and Policy. And then he was also friends of all the previous prime ministers. And he owned pretty much multiple floors at the bottom of the World Trade Center buildings. You had Louis Eisenberg. He was the head of the Port Authority of New York. And he was the guy that actually authorized the lease to Silverstein and Lowy. He was a partner in Goldman Sachs. And he was one of the largest contributors to the Bush-Cheney presidential campaign. And then finally, you had good old Ron Lauder of Estee Lauder, the cosmetic magnate. And he was the chairman of the New York Governor's Commission on Privatization. So he was the person that actually privatized the World Trade Center building and lobbied for it. And he was also instrumental in the privatization of the former Stewart Air Force Base. And the Stewart Air Force Base is notable because a lot of the planes seem to have all converged over this privatized Air Force Base. So people say that the Pentagon wasn't hit by a plane. So where did that plane go? All the planes just happened to like cross this exact newly privatized Air Force Base. And Ron Lauder was the man that helped privatize it. And then I have it somewhere in my notes, the guy that actually owned it. He was a dual citizen of Israel as well. So those four guys right there were like sort of the head Zionist organizers of the World Trade Center building, how you could get around. It wasn't a public building. It was privately owned. Anything that went in and out of the buildings were sort of had to go through these guys. And then I want to just mention one more on this note that's really important was Kroll Incorporated. The man was Jeremy Kroll. So after the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center building, the Port Authority of New York, which was Louis Eisenberg, he gave control of security at the World Trade Center building to Kroll Incorporated in a $2.5 million upgrade. And so, yeah, he was sort of the guy that was or this company was the head of security for the World Trade Center building, and they were able to get in there and inspect the building and sort of decide if you were to take these buildings down, this is how you would do it. And they would have had access to all of the elevator shafts. And then I'll just cut straight to the point of who actually put the bombs in there. And it's there were these two art projects, art groups that were started and were given access to the World Trade Center by the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, and they were called E-Team, who created this light display, and they were there from like, I think it was like February 2001 to like May or June 2001, and you can look online at the E-Team, and they would like do these little designs with lights in the windows of the building at night. And then there was another one called Gelatin, was another art project. And their famous art project is they like knocked out a window of the 91st floor and created like a little stage, a little platform. It's really stupid. It really wasn't art. It wasn't anything. But you can go watch interviews from these guys. They're all Israelis. It's really strange that they're all Israelis. And the director of the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council that set up this residency for these art guys to be there, her father was actually a Israeli official as well. So the 9/11, just the World Trade Center building itself, there's more to this, but just the World Trade Center building itself is just full of Zionists and building up to that point. And if you look at who financially gained the most, how could someone financially gain from a terrorist attack? Larry, Silverstein. Too many names. Too many names right now. Yeah, this man profited billions of dollars, the largest insurance payout in the world. So obviously there was money to be made from that, and I think following the money is always the best thing to do whenever you're looking at things to see why things are happening. If you follow the money, you'll normally find a motive and a culprit. So yeah, that's just my little intro into what I see 9/11 as. And then 9/11 set up the following decades of Middle East interventions that the U.S. has been a part of. Without 9/11, you don't have that as the project for the new American century, which was also written by a bunch of Zionists, said in order for us to go on this new military escapade in the Middle East, we would need a new Pearl Harbor-like event. Without that, nothing will happen. This was their new Pearl Harbor-like event, and the rest is history. Yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, it seems obvious that everything that you said is probably true, and it's interesting. I mean, and then what? What does that mean? If that is true, how does it help us to understand the reality of what's going on? And so I wouldn't argue with any of what you presented. You know what I'm saying? But I think we do, draw different, inferences from that, right? So that truth, what you just explained, leads you to go one way with your worldview, and it leads me to go one way with my worldview. But yeah, I think we have agreement on, all of that. And I think there were Saudi Arabian connections, right? Like, I mean, the terrorists, right? So I think, there obviously was a lot of Zionism and Israel involved, but then you also, of course, had U.S. government involvement. You had U.S. intelligence involvement, and you also had Saudi and Pakistani intelligence involvement, which to me, gets, points me in, in my worldview, and it's a ruling class. It's it's a class of people, and they work together. They work together to further their class interests, and definitely the the Zionism and Israel people, and definitely play a large part and have a large disproportionate influence over that direction. Considering how they comprise very few of the actual members of the ruling class and society in general. But yeah, so we got some comments. Kondo the Bird says it's naive.
In reference to there being, I think she said that right after the comment about changing the financial system. Maybe it is, but it's optimistic. Let's call it optimistic. It's optimistic that this.
Yeah, that exposing how the the financial system works is gonna help get people riled up to change it. Yeah, and I kind of agreed with that comment. So okay, so we talked about 9/11. We're talking about different, so again, we agree on a lot of the facts, and then I think where we diverge is what the facts mean. And so now I think Daryl's frozen, or is he just being very still?
I think our friend Daryl is frozen.
So we're gonna remove here and we're gonna add here.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, we're back in the dark.
You are on your phone or a different device now, I take it.
Yeah. And I apologize. Yeah, I told Billy Bob this would probably happen here.
It happens to us too. Don't worry about it. But yeah, so
yeah.
In 9/11 connection, what do you think of because you've clearly put a lot of research into this, the dancing Israeli stories? Was that of Israelis being arrested because they were allegedly dancing and celebrating? Was that a true thing that happened? Was that urban legend? Or
well, it's hilarious you say urban legend. Yeah, so that was absolutely a real thing, and
that was a real thing.
That absolutely was a real thing. It's funny you say urban legend because the company that they were working for supposedly was called Urban Moving Company, and it was later verified by the FBI that Urban Moving Company was a Mossad operation. Yeah, and you can actually, so a lot of 9/11 FBI reporting has been declassified. Some of it was declassified in the first Trump administration. Some of it was declassified in Obama's second term. But if anyone isn't familiar with the Dancing Israeli story, so a woman's looking out of her apartment building, and she is the day of 9/11. The buildings have been hit, and she notices a handful of what she describes as Arab ethnic looking guys celebrating in the parking lot with cameras, and they're obviously celebrating. So she calls the police. They run off. NYPD eventually catches them in a white van. In the white van, they find not only video recording material, but also bomb making material. And then if you can read the testimony of these guys that were apprehended, these dancing Israelis, and they were noted as saying, "We are not your problem. We have the same problem, and that's the Palestinians." And so they interviewed them, and then they also interviewed some other people that were hired by this Urban Moving Company. That they sort of hired people to make it look like a legitimate business, a legitimate operation. And the testimony of one of the average New Yorkers that was hired by this urban moving company, he gave testimony that said one of them told him, "Give us 10 years, we'll take over your media and the country will be ours." And that's actually in an FBI, document that you can go read. There was also other, so there was the dancing Israelis, but there were other um, Israelis involved, and they were caught in vans. There was one the night of 9/11. So the buildings fell, World Trade Center building 7 fell. And the NYPD stops another moving van headed towards the New York, I believe it's called the Washington Bridge, that had on it, you can look this up, and it was actually reported on CBS and then sort of just memory hold, that there was a white van with a mural painted on it of the Twin Towers with a plane flying into it. And this was the same day that 9/11 happened. And I want to make sure that I get this right. Um, yeah, so the Jerusalem Post reported on September 12th, 2001, American Security Services overnight stopped a car bomb on the George Washington Bridge. The van packed with explosives was stopped on an approach ramp to the bridge. The police audio transmission indicates that the 2 suspects in the van started to run away when the van was stopped and were apprehended shortly after. And the reporting says they were ethnic Middle Eastern people who did not speak English. Now, the person that actually allowed them to be free was, again, another dual citizen. The judge that actually oversaw this, I'm blanking right now who was actually in charge of this. It was Michael Chertoff. He was the head of the United States DOJ's criminal division at the time, and he was actually the person who allowed these people to be set free. So there were multiple instances of Israelis celebrating and even possibly creating more damage that day. They found explosives in the van, and it sort of just got wiped off the map. And yeah, the fingerprints are all over the place. Now, what I will say to what Billy Bob mentioned earlier, there's absolutely American intelligence involved. There's absolutely Saudi connections involved. But the way I've sort of read into this and seen it is that the Saudi intelligence, they were sort of the scapegoats. They fell on the grenade. And I mean, Saudi Arabia themselves were never accused of being responsible, even though the terrorists themselves did come from Saudi Arabia. They were Al Qaeda Wahhabists, and Saudi Arabia is known for starting and funding their Wahhabi schools. And so they were sort of, it was sort of a mix of the three, but I see the Zionist and Israel as sort of leading the charge and having the most to gain from the whole attack and going forward. So that's what I've gotten out of it.
Yeah. You know, again, it's undeniable. The Israel aspect, the Israeli aspect, the Zionist aspect, and the whole idea that, you know, Zionism is a strategy that's been decided upon by Western imperialism, you know, to control the Middle East and control the governments and the resources of that most important region. And so there's no imperialists. There's no ethnic group of pro-United States imperialists that think that there's a different strategy that's better, right? We should ditch Israel and latch on to Egypt. We should use Egypt as our proxy in the Middle East. Like, nobody believes that. Same with Saudi Arabia. You know, it's like nobody says, let's align with Saudi Arabia. Let's make Saudi Arabia the regional Middle East hegemon, and they will further our imperialist interests there. And so it's just striking that, you know, again, when I think about our disagreement and our different perspectives on the issue, the primary thing is, I mean, we agree on everything that you're saying, but we, you know, again, in my opinion, what you're saying coincides with my worldview that says, you know, there's no pushback to this policy. Like, yes, Israel benefits from this policy, but if you think of Israel not as a separate country, because that's not how, you know, that's a liberal idealism that has no relevance to reality. So in reality, it's a class-based system, and you have a ruling class of wealthy elites that whose interests transcend nationalism. So nationalism is not the driving force that liberalism pretends that it is. Israel is the 51st state, and it's owned and operated, you know, by the Western elites. And it's not like, you know, it's a separate country. And so Israel is valuable to the ruling Western oligarch class for a lot of these intelligence reasons, right? Because it's illegal for the CIA and the FBI to surveil U.S. citizens, but we can have Israel do it for us, and then they give us all the information, and we're, you know, and so there's all kinds of value. And when you see Israel not as a separate state, not as a separate nation, but kind of like Ukraine, it's like a 51st state that is just furthering the interests of the oligarchs. You know, to me, that is the most sensible way to understand what's going on. And so I just think that, you know, my primary issue with you know, the inferences and the you know, the conclusions that you draw from your narrative is that you know, it's Israel and the, you know, the rich Jewish elites are doing something that is opposed to our national interest as a country. And of course, from the working class perspective, you know, we have no interest in maintaining an empire or using Israel as a proxy. But from the interest of non-Jewish billionaires, we absolutely do. And that's why there's this, you know, convergence of interests and convergence of alignment amongst the billionaire class on these strategies. And so it wasn't, you know, to say that it's, you know, the driving factor in all these events is ethnicity, is misplaces the, you know, it misdiagnoses the issue, and it obfuscates the material dynamics that are driving this and the material interests of the billionaire class. Anyway, do you want to reply to that?
Well, I think I don't know if I'm quite 100% in agreement with Daryl, but I think in general, you know, in the Middle East, we see all these people like, you know that meme, you know, that thing people say, they say on Fox News all the time, they say like, oh, you know, Israel is our ally in the Middle East, and you know, our lone democracy, our unsinkable aircraft carrier. Well, who is our enemy? Like you mentioned, Saudi Arabia and Egypt, but basically almost without exception, every Gulf state is an ally of the USA and has never been against the USA, right? I mean, there's Syria. There's a couple exceptions like Syria, but I mean, they weren't. It wasn't them declaring war on the USA. It was the USA declaring war on them because Israel was upset with them. So,
right.
You know, how far back do you have to go find a Middle Eastern enemy of America? I mean, like the Tripoli pirates in the early 19th century. I mean, you have to go really far back to find an actual enemy of the USA. And the only reason even those guys were enemies was because they were some Arab pirates who were waylaying ships for hostages and slaves. I mean, it's like 200 years ago. You know, that's how far back. It's
about control. And so we didn't control Gaddafi in Libya. We didn't control Saddam in Iraq. We didn't control Sadat, or who was before Sadat. It was N. It starts with an N, maybe. In Egypt. So you know, who we oppose is people that demand sovereignty. And if you demand sovereignty and you're not going to be a vassal of the United States, like Saudi Arabia is, like the Gulf monarchies are, like Israel is, then you're going to become under our attack. We're going to attack you and we're going to regime change you. And that's what we did in Syria. And that's what we want to do with Iran, because Iran demands.
I'm sure you know this, being such an avid reader of
Nasser was
Comrade Stalin. He was actually the first benefactor of Israel, because the Russian Jews, the Soviet Jews, had made their case to the Soviets that, the Israeli nation has a right to exist, has a right to its homeland, and Stalin initially endorsed them, and actually he gave a lot of their initial weapons and a lot of the IDF's first generation of military talent were Red Army officers who had fought in World War II. They were Jewish Soviets who had fought in World War II, and they went to Israel. And allegedly, I don't know if this is true because I've never been to Israel, but I've read on the internet that those what are those called? What are those communist farms that they have? Kibbutzes? What are they called?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Allegedly, some of those still have portraits of Stalin, like the older people who can remember like the first years of Israel, like the 1940s, 1950s, still have portraits of Stalin, which is very funny when you think about it. But he got turned off, and it's very funny how he has a reputation as this big anti-Semite now. Like, oh, he was against the Jews. He abused the Jews, because he did eventually got turned off to the Israel project. He's just like, well, this is not beneficial to, this is not beneficial to us. And then in 1967 is when the USA got on board with the Israel project, because they dumped the Soviet Union and went over to the USA. And since 1967 has been when, and we have to ask, what did this? I have to ask, since I think, Billy Bob, you disagree with Daryl, and I'm kind of leaning towards Daryl's perspective. What has if you're just from the perspective of the American taxpayer, the American citizen, what has Israel done
for us?
Right.
Well, again, I mean, you have to understand what us is. And so in my worldview, there's no such thing as us. There's the working class, and then there's the oligarch class. And so what they've done for the oligarchs, I would say you can write books about. What they've done for the working class, not much. And so everything you have to look through the class lens and understand through the class paradigm. But if we're talking about the oligarchy, like Israel is a valuable asset to the ruling Western oligarchy in any number of ways. And I mean, yeah. So again, it's a liberal conception of reality to think as us being a nation state with national interests. Like that's to me, that's a way of perceiving reality that has nothing to do with how reality is actually functions and comprises. And so I would just reject the premise, and I would say you got to look at it through the reality of oppositional class interests and understand that Israel has been, and that's why you see these people promoting Israel and over and over and over again saying Israel is our greatest ally, because they want the working class to embrace and adopt the oligarch interests. They want, that's what they do constantly with propaganda, is trying to get the working class to embrace the worldview, the perspectives, and the interests of the oligarchs when our interests are diametrically opposed to them. And I mean, that's all part of the class struggle that socialism explains.
Well, I mean, I think the whole class, I think there is validity to the class consciousness idea, right?
Okay.
Right, because
Can I?
Go ahead, Daryl. Go ahead. No, you're the guest. You go ahead. What are you going to say?
Oh, no worries. Yeah, so thanks to you, Billy Bob, since we've been having these conversations and you having me on, I've sort of delved into a little bit of Marxist theory that I haven't in a long time. I mean, I used to read a little bit here and there, but ever since I started interacting with you, I sort of started looking into Mao's own Chinese variant of Marxism and Lenin's own variant of Marxism. And your idea that this class that this class struggle is the only thing that exists isn't exactly how other revolutionary leaders saw it. And I came across this thing that Mao wrote. He wrote an essay or a paper called Contradictions. Are you familiar with that at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
on
and
contradiction, I think it was on
contradiction. Yeah, on contradiction, right? And it goes off like this like Hegelian thought of the dialectical materialism. And yes, but what his main point of that was, or one of the points in these contradictions, was you have primary and or principled, or I forget what he said, primary contradictions and secondary contradictions. And in that paper, he makes the argument that Japanese imperialism at the time and the invasion of Japan, that was the principal contradiction, and that the internal class struggle of the Han Chinese people were secondary to that. So Mao saw it that the ethnic dynamic and the external forces that were pushing into China, those needed to be addressed and solved first before the economic internal problems of China were addressed. And I think that's amazing. I think like that's exactly where I'm at. And because here's the thing, we agree on a lot of things. I don't think American imperialism is a good thing. I don't think it's a moral thing. I don't think it benefits. It might benefit materially a little bit for the average American, but I don't want it. I don't want us being the policemen of the world. I don't want military bases everywhere. I'm not for exploitation. On the economic side, I'm a collectivist as well, I think, but I would put limits on it. But I think that Mao saw it that this driving imperial Japanese force was more important to address than the class struggle inside the country. And I see the same thing with the state of Israel, and Jewish individuals that prioritize their ethnicity and their home state over our nation state. I see that without addressing that first, that the idea that we have economic inequality, that doesn't matter as much to me without addressing the Zionist problems that we have in America. And as far as the Saudi angle and Pakistani intelligence with 9/11 and all of that, and the understanding that it's all one big class thing, I don't see any Saudi nationals running our government. I don't see any Pakistani, I don't see a Pakistani.
Tucker Carlson is paid off by Qatar. Didn't you read?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Qatar controls
But
everything.
right. But I mean, but he's not running any government agency or department.
Right.
And I'd say, and then look at all the people that are attacking him. Obviously, Zionists have a stranglehold on Western media. That's not debatable. The statistics are there. They're not a minority. Zionists do run all the major networks. They are in all the executive positions. They're the majority of shareholders of these corporations, and they're the ones running the show over here. So anytime you've said before, where's the pushback? Well, if the Zionists control the media, you're not going to hear about the pushback, even if there is guys trying to be vocal about it and are more nationalist or traditional when it comes to America. You're not going to hear about it because the Zionists run everything. Name one AI or social media company that is not run by a Zionist or a Jewish individual. Like, you can't. The way we speak, Billy Bob, it's Mark Zuckerberg. So that's just my view. I think that the Zionist, and you can call it the ethnic aspect, I think that needs to be addressed before anything else can be addressed.
Okay. I mean, that's interesting. I don't see that I'm have any, what Mao was saying doesn't really contradict my worldview, in my opinion. I mean, I agree with Mao. And I think today it's actually very similar, right? I think the primary contradiction today is the struggle against Western imperialism. It's the global humanitarian struggle against Western imperialism that's our primary contradiction. And that's why we see non-communist countries like Iran, like Russia, like joining with communist countries like China to form an axis of resistance. So they're overcoming the fact that you have non-communist countries joining with communist countries to resist the primary contradiction, which is Western imperialism. And another way that I always describe that as, the struggle against Western imperialism is how the class struggle is playing out today in the 21st century. Like, that's how I see the class struggle today is a united struggle against Western imperialism. So that's how I describe that. But I don't see, so that's how I think what Mao says, coincides with my perspective, because that's the primary contradiction today. And so, you kind of twist that quite a bit and, and focus on ethnic terms, and you focus on, how people of this particular ethnicity are having outsized influence in our society, in the United States, in the strategies that are adopted by our government to further their hegemonic interests of global domination. And so that strategy is being pursued in a certain way, and it plays out in actual policies, in actual investments. And I mean, it's material. He didn't want to hear it. No, I'm sure
we lost him. Yeah. Let's wait for him to come back. Okay, we lost Daryl. That's unfortunate. Let's catch up while we're waiting for Daryl to come back. Why don't we catch up on the comments? I do think we have that troll.
Well, I like this one. Let's talk about this one. I'm not sure.
Billy Bob is a Trotskyist. You're a Trotskyist. Oh shit! Crap! Sorry, Daryl. I meant to add you to the stage, and I clicked to kick you from the stage, which is not what I meant to do. Okay.
I apologize. This storm's kicking my butt over here.
Oh, you have a storm right now in Florida.
Oh yeah. There's like a giant band of tornadoes and heavy downpour coming through right now. Yeah.
How very convenient timing, Daryl. Very convenient.
Right,
did I miss something good?
You missed me winning. I just won.
Yeah.
You were
Billy Bob is
Billy
Bob is the Trump of the communist. All he cares about is winning.
So I was going to say to interject that, I mean, I think there's something to be said with the Marxist model of there's only class warfare, but the issue is, like Daryl was saying, I think, and it's not even just Zionists or Israelis or Jews. It's not just a Jew thing. I don't think it's just a Jew thing. I think the issue is you have a lot of groups who do have in-group favoritism. That is like, and unfortunately, I have this conflict, like on social media, on the internet, when I talk to people, I have this conflict with Marxists and left-leaning people all the time, because I don't necessarily disagree with them, but it's like they can't get over this idea that outside of the USA and certain Western countries, it's completely the norm to just think about your particular ethnic group. Like if you live in Kuwait or Qatar, or a lot of these countries, Americans come to some of these countries that are very surprised, and they'll just like look at like the job ads or the news, and people will just openly just say what race or ethnic group of people they want to hire. They'll just openly say it, and they're very shocked by that. So I think that's the flaw, and I think that's the issue with certain Western countries, because we just can't conceptualize that. So, and then you bring these people in as immigrants, which I'm not saying it's necessarily in of itself bad immigrants, but the problem is that they come in, and of course, They prioritize their group. So you bring in Jews, what do? They prioritize Israel. You bring in Indians, what do? They prioritize Indians because of course that's what
Yeah.
that's human nature to do.
Yeah.
And people can't wrap their heads around that. So I think so. I'm not saying Marxist theory or Marxist dialectics are wrong, but you can't ignore the ethnic aspect. And it's not even like an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory because it isn't just Jews. It's basically everybody who thinks that way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they do studies on in-group favoritism. There's been multiple studies, and you can see that Jews as a group are the most collective. They are the most ethnocentric. And contrary to American liberal opinion, whites are actually the least ethnocentric group. And this is sort of goes back to one of my problems with not Marxism as an economic model, but as a social model, is that they sort of paint the white man bad, West bad, and it's we're the West is this racist imperial thing that just goes around stealing from black and brown people, where that's not really a good representation of history. And whites are the least ethnocentric group. I mean, I grew up, I never thought of myself as like me being white was the least of my identifiers. If you asked me, who are you, Daryl? I'd say, well, I'm this old. I'm a father. This is what I do for work, blah, 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 blah. But if you were to go ask any other group, they say, go ask, I'm not trying to be mean or stereotypical. Go ask Jamaica. And she'd say, I'm a black woman. Like, I would never like open up with, I'm a white man. But every other group seems to do that. And I think that's due to a couple of things. I think that we've sort of been educated that way. White America has been educated that way. I think a lot by a lot of Jewish academics who they would benefit from Western people not identifying with their race, or knowing their history in Europe or the early colonization of America. And I think it also goes back to way long ago, the Catholic Church, and when the church ruled over Europe, they actually outlawed like cousin marriages, which is actually extremely common still in the world. That people don't know. A lot of nations, a lot of different groups, they first and second cousin marriage happens all the time. I believe in the UK, I think it was 95% of all birth defects or something were from Pakistani immigrants who were married to their first or second cousin. So that's something on its own right there. But
Well, did you see those PSAs? Did you see those the British, like an actual member of British Parliament stood up and said we should bring back cousin marriages because it's discrimination to say cousin marriages.
Was it a brown guy?
It was a Pakistani person.
It was a Pakistani guy? Yeah. So yeah, point proven. Yeah. But yeah, so I think the self-identifiers is, like you said, something that we don't think about, that the rest of the world very much is still a part of their thinking. And I think that it's been to America's detriment that we haven't. That if you notice the race, that you're a racist. If you just acknowledge the fact that different groups of people are different, you're automatically labeled and branded a racist. And I don't think that's a good, healthy, or honest way to look at the world. There's obviously there's obviously differences, like a Nigerian and a Swede are not the same person. It's sort of goes back to that nature nurture thing. I believe there's more to the nature than there is to the nurture, and we've sort of flipped that around. And this whole idea, I actually read something um, a while ago on the idea of cultural relativism. So there was this whole school of anthropology and understanding different cultures and stuff was set on was a European study, and we sort of judged other groups around the world with our culture and our society sort of being the baseline, and then we judge other countries, cultures, people based off our standards. And then that all changed in the 1920s from a guy named Franz Boas, and he is the father of new anthropology. He was a Jewish individual. He was funded by the German Jewish banking family, the Warburgs, and they said it's racist to judge these other groups by your standards. You need to look at those groups through their lens. So if I'm looking at practices in India and how they conduct themselves, I need to look at it through how they look at it and not by my own standards of like cleanliness or multiple things. And um and yeah, and but the point of that Franz Boas thing is that when they tried to introduce it into academia, Franz Boas and Warburg decided that they needed to get it approved by a council of Gentiles, because if it wasn't approved by a council of Gentiles, then it would get rejected as a Jewish plot. And cut to 30 years later in the 1950s, the ADL did a study and found that over 90% of schools had adopted this new form of anthropology and cultural relativism. And I think that's where that has a huge influence on why the West and white Americans don't sort of have that self-identity and ethnocentrism that all these other groups around the world have. And yeah.
So that's good. No, that's good. And so Courtney thinks you're a racist. I want to interject. So it's actually unusual because usually I'm the most right-leaning person on this show. It's weird to actually have someone who's more right-leaning than me. So I do want to maybe add some clarification to that. So I think
Go for it.
I have this theory that so certain groups of people either became, who overcome their in-group favoritism are the ones who become more imperial. Every group that successfully builds an empire are the ones who overcome their in-group preferences. And I'll even bring up an example of Poland. Like they're white Europeans. They never had an empire. They never had colonies. And it's always been a small country, and they've never successfully become an empire. And the reason why is because if you go to Poland, they're very, very, even by your, they're probably one of the most xenophobic groups in Europe, right? So like if you're not a Pole, you're like, well, what's wrong with you? You're weird. We don't like you. If you go to groups, like if you go to Britain or if you go to Russia or if you go to France, the Netherlands, groups that did successfully build, some kind of large empire, you'll find they're very they kind of have that, just because you're not one of us doesn't mean you're nobody. So I think to have that imperial, because you think about it, it's like, okay, if you have an empire and you have all these different ethnic groups that you conquered or subjugated, you're still pulling people from those cultures. Like, okay, you can come back to our capital city, you can be an engineer or an architect, an artist or whatever. and you're a black guy or an Asian guy or whatever, and you're still like a successful, interesting person. You're not discriminated against. I think it's actually, not to say colonialism is good or that empires never do anything bad or that there's never discrimination even,
Right.
but there's this idea that we can pull people we can have immigrants or we can have people, workers from these colonies come back to the homeland, and they're not to have that mindset. You do need that, to even have an empire. You need that mindset, but most people don't get that, and they just think, well, it's us or them. They have that us or them lens that they see the world.
I like that. I like that view. I mean, that does make sense. I like the Poland example because obviously they're very strict on their immigration, right?
Mhm.
But that's honestly, compare Poland to any country in Western Europe that the demographic change has literally flipped that whole country on its head, as I see it. I went to London this past summer. I'm not sure if you guys have been to London at all or any major cities in Western Europe, but I mean, I was struggling to find British people, and I was hoping to have a cup of tea with some Brits, and it's there were not too many Brits running around, and honestly, for me, that's sad. That's sad because I let me push back on the idea that I'm a racist. To my understanding, when I define what a racist is, that is an irrational hatred of a group of people simply based off the color of their skin. And I am not that person. I have friends of all different religious and ethnic backgrounds. Some of my closest friends are Black. Some of them, one of my good friends, he's from Jordan. He's a Muslim. And so the idea that you can't notice differences in different groups of people and demographics, and acknowledge them. Some are positive, some are negative, and uh, but you also can't prefer your own culture or people that look like you. Um, I reject that idea. I reject the idea that that's inherently a bad, the natural. As you said, every other group in the world seems to do it. But I do like that. I do like that in that imperialist sort of idea that the groups that go out and try to conquer the world, they uh, sort of bring those parts of the world home with them. So I see that. I like that.
I kind of don't understand what the point is of, I mean, really just hyper fixating on ethnic differences. Like, I don't think anybody denies that ethnic differences, genetic differences exist. I think the question is, what do those differences play in, what's going on geopolitically? Where have we progressed from? Like, what is history? What is the historic reality that has caused us to arrive at this present point right now, contemporarily? I mean, where we're at right now is a direct result of, the recent history and, the last, decades and generations. And so there's a reality there. There's a material reality with history. There's a material reality that exists now. And if we understand that material reality, we know how to advocate and where our advocacy should be about how to progress. Who are the obstacles for progress? What is progress? So all of these things are important to me. And what's not important is ethnic differences, unless, you have a case to make about how ethnic differences have resulted in, the history and the contemporary reality. And then, it's everything is really being driven ethnically speaking. And we have to address these ethnic issues in order to progress. And so, the last 30 minutes of the conversation has been, hey, race is real, and there's real genetic differences, and I get it. That's not a dispute. Nobody's disputing that there's differences. I don't dispute that white people don't see themselves as a group where they treat each other like a tribe, and there's extreme tribalism in the same way that Jewish people do. And of course, anybody with half a brain and knows how to observe things can understand that, a lot of people who identify as Jewish are hyper tribalistic. And, there's reasons for that. There's a history that explains why that is, and so, you're again, I think we agree on, the observations. I think where we disagree is the implications of these observations, what these observations mean. And I don't think that it makes a lot of sense to hyper-focus on ethnicity or to lament the lack of tribalism among white people. Like, number one, white people isn't an ethnicity. There's all kinds of people are white, and they're not one group, just like black people. We could talk about black Americans, but there's black people of, in Asia, and the Middle East and Africa, Central and South America. So, I'm not sure the utility in this focus. To me, it's kind of a waste of time. And, you're making observations that are true, but how do, what is the inference? What is the importance of these observations? How does it get us to a place where we understand what's going on, and it gets us to a place where we know what we should be advocating for and to identify the obstacles to progress? Again, when I do that, I see Western imperialism as the primary obstacle to progress. And I see Western imperialism comprised of the ruling oligarch class, which is not just one ethnicity. It's people of every ethnicity. It has to do with their material conditions and their interests, which are due to their material conditions of being billionaires. They have interests that are different than the working class interests. But go ahead.
Well, I want to interject. So I do think especially when it comes to Israel and Zionism and Jews, it can just sound like we're just picking on Jews. That, it's us versus them. There's humanity versus Jews. It sounds very bad when you put it that way. But if you put it in terms of ethnicity, everybody to some extent does this. Then also Zionism makes more sense. If you just realize, everybody to some extent does this, Zionism makes a lot more sense, because I think people tend to dismiss it as like this kooky conspiracy theory. Well, why would they think like that? Well, if you argue, everybody or almost everybody to some extent thinks that way, then you're like, oh, okay. So every group of people kind of like, well, here's our group, and we're going to work towards the interests of our group. Then it suddenly makes a lot more sense. That's why I think it's important to bring up. And I will mention, after living in Russia for about 4 years, as an American, I will say America is kind of like the weird country. America is actually the more time I spend outside of America, the more I realize it's a weird country, because we're so
exceptional, Ian. We're exceptional.
We're exceptional, right? We're exceptional, right? We're very obsessed with race, which for us kind of means like literal, what color are you? There's brown people, there's black people, there's white people, there's yellow people, there's like tan people. We think, I kind of realize it's actually weird, and it goes back hundreds of years. We think in very literal terms. If you go outside of the USA, they think more in terms of ethnicity. It's like, those are Armenian guys, or those are Azari guys, or those are Jewish guys, or those are Kazakh guys. And the longer I lived outside the USA, I kind of realized that's how most people outside of the USA think. They think you look at someone and you're like, well, who is this guy? Well, he's and once you realize who he is, it gives you some clues about it. If you realize, it's a Jewish guy, or you realize, it's an Armenian guy, or it's a French guy, it gives you some clues just about him. It's not even a good or bad thing. It's just it's what everybody does. So I kind of realized that's why America is this really distorted view of I think it really affects also just how Americans perceive our foreign policy, and like Israel, and even just everything else, because we think in terms of literal color, which isn't how other people think. They don't really care if you're
Right,
black
right.
or white. They don't care. Like
Well,
Russians aren't going to be all over you because you're white. They don't care that you're white. They'll look at your ethnic group. Oh, you're French or you're English or you're American. That's literally what they'll say to you. They don't care that you're white. It doesn't matter to them.
Well, I would say that's worked to the benefit of the Zionist, because until you're really conscious of, um, through the lack of a better term or word here, it's been used throughout history for the past 2,000 years, the Jewish question, and actually noticing Jewish individuals. Most Jewish individuals in the American sort of the lens of things, they're just white guys. I never looked at Jewish guys as Jewish. When I saw the actors on TV or government officials, I never thought that, oh, these are Jewish people. But I think I have a list here of the Biden administration particularly highlighted just the total Zionist Jewish like overrepresentation in our government to the highest degree. And someone that's not really conscious like they are in the rest of the world, like in Russia, where you're like, oh, well, that dude's a Slav, that dude's like some Balkan thing, that dude's Czechoslovakian, whatever. And if you were just to paint all those people as white, you would obviously lose a lot of ideas on how the dynamics are working and what groups are really in charge if you just sort of whitewash them all. But I mean, like in the Biden administration in 2024, we had the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the Secretary of Treasury, the CIA Director, the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of Homeland Security, SEC Chairman, Director of CDC, Director of ATF, FCC, Federal Reserve, National Security Advisor, White House Counsel, Science Tech Advisor, Council Economic Advisor, Deputy Health Secretary, Director of CDC, Chief of Staff, Council on Gender Policy, COVID-19 Response, Bureau of Energy Resources, Council on Humanities. Like it goes on, like there's like just endless pages. So when you whitewash everybody as white, I think that you don't understand the dynamic of America, or to go back to Mao's contradictions here, what's your primary contradiction? What's your secondary? I think we do have an ethnic dynamic in this country that is sort of getting priority over the others. And until you look at it that way, you're not really going to understand how America works, why we do the things that we do, what policies we prioritize. And I would say that I have an interest in preserving. I mean, the same way I would never condemn Poland for saying they want to remain Polish when they deny refugees or immigrants. I would never say, oh, that's a racist policy. I'd say those guys are trying to preserve tradition and culture that makes them unique. And I think that there is benefits to preserving American culture traditionally. This idea that America is this melting pot, that is not true. That America was 90% Western European all the way up until 1965. It was the Hart-Celler Act, which was introduced. Celler was a Jewish representative that introduced it, and it was heavily lobbied by the ADL and other Jewish organizations to permit the third world to immigrate here. And it overpassed we did a census, I believe it was in like 1902, said we have this many Irish descendants, this many British, this many Italians, and our immigration policy is going to reflect the demographic makeup of America as it stood at the time. Then cut to the civil rights movement, and we introduced the Hart-Celler Act, which says, no, now we want people from Kenya, the Congo, India, Pakistan, all over the world. And I think that when you don't understand America and all the progress, we have our own tragedies and scandals and things that we've done that I'm don't approve of, I'm not proud of. But who gave the world electricity? Who gave the world every form of transportation? cars, planes, helicopters, trains. That was America. That was European descendants that progressed the world. I mean, who lifted the third world out of poverty? It was the West. It was the West. It wasn't. I mean, sure, China, and they had their own revolution and their own progression. Same with the Soviets. But as far as technology goes, and just vast human improvements across the board, whether it's technology, literacy, world hunger, that was Western innovation that helped all those things. So I see I have a priority of keeping the West how it traditionally was. And I don't think that's inherently evil, bad, racist, or anything. I think it's honestly better for the rest of the world. Like all these things came from the West. Why shouldn't we want to keep the West the West?
So that's a lot, Daryl. That's a lot.
I know I'm rambling.
You've given us to discuss.
No, and I want to hear Billy Bob's pushback, because I've sided mostly with Daryl here, and the
Thank
last
you,
20
Ian.
minutes so have been very little pushback from Billy Bob's. I want to hear Billy Bob's in this next segment. I want to hear Billy Bob's pushback.
Well, again, there was at least 2 points, 3 points. Yeah, 3 points. Okay, 3 points. So the first point is overrepresentation, Jewish overrepresentation in powers of influence and, wealth and control. And then there's immigration. And then there is, how the white race has just benefited humanity tremendously. So let's do the first one. So, we're talking about Jewish overrepresentation. Obviously, it's undeniable, right? So there's 2% of the population-ish identifies as Jewish, and they are just definitely overrepresented in positions of power and influence in the government, in the media. I mean, that's undeniable. But here's what I would say. It's not just any kind of Jew, Daryl. It's not just any kind of Jew that is allowed in a position of wealth, power, authority, right? It's got to be a Jewish person who promotes Israel and who promotes this imperialist interest that again coincides with the wealthy elites of all ethnicities. All of the Western elites that comprise the ruling class. You can't just be any old Jew. And now, granted, Daryl, most Jews today are Zionist and they support and defend Israel, and that's a fact. But there are Jews that don't, and those Jews aren't allowed anywhere near power, Daryl. So that's important to understand. And so, what is the driving force? Is it your ethnicity? No, it's your politics. Now, ethnicity helps because obviously there is this overrepresentation, but ethnicity is not trumping political views, and it's politics, it's interests. And so that's, that's my response to number one, the overrepresentation. As far as immigration, it's the same thing. I think that, people who are very tribalistic thinking in their Jewishness definitely want to make sure that there is not strong ethnic group cohesion among other groups that'll turn on them and, due to their tight tribalistic thinking, cause another pogrom or enact another expulsion of people who are Jewish. And so there's a historical, understandable, tribalistic approach to immigration that is rational for people who identify as Jewish to want to promote. But guess what? There's also overlap with the billionaire class, because the billionaire class is also interested in promoting mass immigration to lower wages and to ensure that the working class is not united, and they're easily fractured among by cultural means, religious means, ethnicity means. And if you have a very diverse working class, you secure yourself, you secure your position as the ruling class. And so there's an overlap of interests between Jewish tribalism and multi-ethnic billionaire class interests. That's immigration. And then what was the last one? Was
Western ingenuity.
Yeah, I mean, okay. I mean, I don't know. I'm not gonna make the argument that white people are superior. Like I don't
No,
believe
that's
that.
not that's not my argument either. My argument is when it comes to technology and just innovation, right? Because I mean, everyone has their strong suits, right? And it doesn't mean that one strong suit is better than the other. But when it comes to just inventions and systems that have benefited not just their own civilization but the whole world, Western civilization has done so more. The whole world is basically running off the Western civilization. I mean, the idea of democracy and laws, the way that they're implemented, it's all based off whether it's the Greeks, the Romans, the Renaissance, the Western culture has sort of like the default like platform of the entire world, and then the technologies that the West has created has benefited everybody. So I see preserving the West as beneficial to not just the West but everyone. Yeah, democracy also sucks. Liberal democracy also sucks. Agreed. Yeah, but hey, I'm not advocating for liberal democracy. I'm just saying that the idea that as Billy Bob would say, like the workers get their say and are represented in their government, that's a good thing. Yeah.
So, Condor's comments, I was going to respond to that in a certain way. Condor's comments have really expanded a little bit my response. And so my first response is that, the fact that, to whatever extent the West and the United States and white people have contributed to technology and development, I would argue is not a genetic component. It has material factors, it has environmental factors, and it has, history. It has the reality of how history played out with, colonization and exploiting other countries and benefiting from that exploitation and profiting from that exploitation, financially, economically, which probably has contributed to, the whatever, technological benefits that you can put at the West, that you can claim, that the West can claim credit for. I'm going to say that is not a genetic natural thing. It's an environmental material factor. And then but what Condor was saying is that's the thing. You can't have it both ways. You can't say it's good for humanity to preserve all the great things that the West has done without embracing the bad things that the West has done. And I think if we think about, my understanding of history, like the West has been really bad. Like it's been driving things, like at least since World War I, right? I mean, let's just take World War I. I mean, that was a Western war and it killed millions of people. And it was probably not necessary, but it was a result of material conditions. It was a result of different groups of oligarchs, wanting to control and dominate the rest of the planet, create empires, create colonies where they could extract wealth. And so, I mean, that was really bad. And World War I, of course, set up World War II. And World War I also caused the ideology of socialism to really, manifest itself in a way that it hadn't before. I mean, you had the Paris Commune, but that wasn't nothing to actually socialism taking, control and root in an entire country and an entire region of the world. And so, but that set up World War II. It was like, it was the West's antagonism and fear of and hate for an alternative way of governing, an alternative way of exist, the arming up of Hitler and unleashing the Soviet Union, same with Japan and China. So I mean, that's all part and parcel of what the West has done. And I would say it's not a good thing. And I mean, that's not to mention, the genocide of the Native Americans and, hundreds of years of slavery to build the country up. So, I mean, I think that's all true. And I mean, you can dismiss that as blue-haired liberal nonsense, but I think it's the objective reality.
Well, I mean, that whole idea of like America's founding is very one-sided the way you put it. And the people that showed up here originally, they weren't here for wealth. The original settlers, they were settlers. They were religious refugees, and they were pioneers. They weren't here to necessarily make money. They were here to better lives. Yeah, there were resources here that were untapped, and they came here to make better lives for themselves and their family. And you're sort of attributing like a hostile intent to them, which I think is unnecessary. And I was reading the ACP's
We're not
webpage
talking
the
about
other.
the same people. We're not talking about the same people. Like, because
Okay.
what I'm saying is real and what you're saying is true. So I'm saying something true that you're not addressing, and you're saying something true that misses my point. That's what I think is
Okay.
happening here. So I'm
Okay.
not saying that the pioneers came here to genocide the Indians. I'm saying the Indians were genocided ultimately, right? And slavery did happen for hundreds of years to build up the country. Like that happened, but also pioneers did come here for religious freedom. Like both of us are correct.
But that whole framing sort of puts a monopoly on genocide on the West, where as if
No,
the Indians
you're
weren't
inverting that.
massacring. No, that the Indians were massacring each other. Like, I mean, you had the Iroquois wiped out like 4 different tribes, tens of thousands of Native Americans. They were killing themselves. There was
That's
an
also a
Apache
true
book that I
statement
read
as
years ago.
far as it's true,
Yeah,
but it doesn't like it
I think you
doesn't
have to weigh
make
both
what I said
sides.
not true.
So, okay, so would you, so I was reading the ACP website, and honestly, it sounds, it reads like hot garbage to me. It sounds like an angsty 13-year-old wrote it, a lot of this stuff. So like this whole like materialism history idea and this oppress and oppressor, it exists to a certain degree, but that is just like a sliver of reality. You can't judge everything through this. The idea that America was built off slave labor, it was literally like 1% of the population owned slaves. I actually looked up the stat. I think it was like 5% at the height of slavery, 5% of the GDP came from slave labor. So the idea that America was built off whites oppressing African slaves doesn't, I'm not negating the cruelty, the terrible conditions, any of that. That absolutely exists, and you should recognize it and acknowledge it. But to only focus on that doesn't is just not the reality of things. And I don't think, and the Native American genocide, 90% of them were killed by diseases like smallpox, and they didn't come over here to spread disease. To they didn't even know they were bringing diseases. So if the benefit in highlighting things like that, it was terrible. I agree. Throughout the history of America, we treated the Native Americans terrible. We've tried to reconcile that. I mean, I don't know, in the past couple of decades, and obviously you can't go back in history and undo things, but you also can't spend the rest of history trying to reverse previous wrongs. And I just see that whole framing of history as it doesn't benefit anybody, especially the Western people that still live here.
So
I mean,
I
as far as
think I'll
benefit-
come
go ahead.
in. I will come in on Billy Bob's defense here.
Go for
So I think when it comes to, so I do agree that colonialism brought industrialization, which was a good thing for most of the world. I think the problem with colonialization is it was done without consent, and with it was very, the way certain countries did colonialism was very cruel. So there is, so for both the people on this, on our panel here, and for our people watching the show, I would strongly recommend watching. There is a Libyan movie. It was a Hollywood movie that Gaddafi paid for. Like Libya actually paid for this movie. It was called The Lion of the Desert. It was a 1980s movie It was an American movie, but Libya funded it, and it's about the Libyan resistance against Italian colonization. It's worth watching. You can watch it for free. It's easy to find on the internet if you search for it. I think it gives a very well, it's not an explicitly Marxist argument, but I think it explains why colonialism is bad, but you can watch it, you can be like, well, okay, I understand. It leaves you with kind of an educated opinion. It's a very interesting. So I strongly recommend everybody watching this show to watch that movie, because and it's interesting because also Italy is one of those countries that kind of gets a free pass on colonialism, because when you think about how bad colonialism, people think of like, oh, the British Empire, the French, but no one really thinks of Italians. And then when you look at what Italians did to people in their colonies, it's astonishing. You're like, wow, I mean, it's incredible the things they did to people. But it also it challenges colonialism in a way, because Arabs in North Africa and the Middle East have culture. They didn't industrialize like Europeans did. Maybe there's some cultural, like Daryl was saying, there's some cultural differences in why Arabs industrialize, but they have culture. They have very interesting and rich culture. But then you come from your country, their country, and you say, well, you're going to do things our way, and if you don't do things our way, we'll do terrible things to you. So it's so you let if you let individual cultures industrialize their own way at their own pace and the way they want to, it avoids these conflicts that we have now. The problem is that I think in the modern world we have this problem of you have white guilt, you have liberals who are like, oh, colonialism was evil, is the worst thing that ever happened. But I think we can take a more nuanced approach of saying colonialism was bad because we imposed this on people and did these terrible things to people because they didn't cooperate with us. But you can also recognize that I guess you can take a more middle of the road approach to some of this, if I'm making sense here.
No, that was an awful defense of my argument, Ian.
Well, I want to be clear that I'm right on board with you, Ian. I'm sort of taking the hard line right view here to push back on Billy Bob's like strictly everything they did was evil sort of point of view here. And this I don't know, this leftist sort of view of history of oppressed and oppressor. It's obviously more nuanced, and some countries and nations were definitely worse than others. I'm reading a book right now called The Cause and Effect of the Wars in South Africa. So like the Boer Wars, which were between the British and then the original Dutch farmers. And the Dutch farmers that came down, they just wanted land, right? They just wanted to farm, and they were pretty like isolationist for the most part, that went and settled like towards like the inward of South Africa. And they were remote areas that were uninhabited for the most part. Yes, there were native tribes around, but those guys were even further up north. And then it wasn't until the discovery of gold that Britain actually got involved, because the Dutch farmers were there in the 1600s. The British, they didn't have an interest really down there for the most part till the like mid 1800s. I believe I might be throwing my numbers off here. And once the gold was discovered, that's when Cecil Rhodes primarily comes down, and they have an interest there. Cecil Rhodes, as this book has enlightened me to, his financiers were the Rothschilds. So go figure, the British branch of the Rothschild family were the primary financiers of the British colonialism of South Africa. So yeah, it's obviously more nuanced, and there's definitely moneyed interests and terrible things that have happened over the past couple hundred years, but I don't think it's all bad. And um, yeah, I obviously condemn subjugation of people, exploitation of people, and I think I don't think it's strictly just a Western thing as well. I think the West was able to do it, not because they had the intention that nobody else had, but because they had the technology to actually do it. So, Billy Bob, are you familiar with the invention of Liberia in the late 1800s? The nation of Liberia.
I mean, I know it was created. It was created by Cecil Rhodes for to send the slaves back.
Yeah.
They
So
wanted to.
yeah. So after the Civil War, there was a whole movement that they were like, okay, well, I mean, both the North and South agreed that they were like, okay, well, we're going to free slaves, but they didn't necessarily want these free slaves in their society, so they created the state of Liberia. But once they sent over the first couple of ships, do you know what the first thing that these free slaves did in Liberia?
What?
They
I don't know.
enslaved the native Africans once they got there, and and they did so for over 100 years, and so it wasn't like a Western thing. These were all freed slaves from America that went and settled that Western portion of Africa, and then they started enslaving the native Africans themselves, which is, I don't know. I find that kind of ironic that a bunch of free slaves went and enslaved other people. Um, I don't know where that
Yeah.
lands in our conversation. I just wanted to throw that in there.
It's interesting. I mean, I think, we're talking past each other to a great extent, because I feel like I'm saying things that are true, and you're kind of addressing things that I didn't say. Like, like it's everything. Like, I mean, like there's no nuance. I never said there's no nuance. I never said that genocide and slavery was everything. Now, I think we're probably going to disagree about the extent to which, it mattered. And, you have the 5% number where, at the height of slavery, it was just 5% of GDP. I'm sure there's people that could push back on that. And I'm not saying it was everything. I'm saying it was the reality, and it was an abominable reality. And the fact that, to whatever extent freed slaves went to Liberia and enslaved people, like that doesn't justify or make anything okay. And it doesn't really affect anything I'm saying, So, but I mean, just talking about, progress, right? I'm interested in progress. I'm interested in understanding correctly how we got to where we are. And I can't understand where we are at if I don't have an explanation for history. And when I try and understand and explain history, like the Marxist conception of history is the most fundamental and grounded in reality, because it is a materialist view of history. And it explains that it's not things like people's ideas that are the drivers of history. It's material relationships. It's how things are produced and exchanged, and all of that is fundamental to creating a class society that confines society and constrains humanity within a certain system. And this system has again played itself out. It was hereditary monarchy, and that system evolved into oligarchy, and we've had an oligarchy ever since. And so how do you improve on oligarchy? How do you improve on the richest 1%? Owning, what did you say? 50% of the slaves was just by 1% of the people.
No. So it's actually 1.5% of the population. That's the only. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted with my dog here. Out of the entire population at the height of slavery, only 1.5% of the population actually owned the slaves.
Right. And that's true today, right? Because 1.5% of the population owns the stock market. They own all the wealth, at least all the disposable wealth. And so it's always been the wealthy elites, this ownership class, that have been the drivers of society and the drivers of policies and the drivers of strategies for global domination, the drivers of, hey, let's go colonize these poor people. They're fucking backwards. We can fucking exploit the fuck out of them and we can take all their shit. Like this is how history has played out. Like this is just the reality of the past, 300 years of capitalist history, after the end of monarchy. And so, understanding that and saying, how should we be? Like, what is wrong with that going forward? How ought we relate to the rest of humanity, other societies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And to me, that's progress. Well, we would be progressing as a species if we stopped doing that. If we stopped colonizing, if we stopped raping and stealing resources from other countries, like that would be good. That would be an improvement for our planet, for our species. And so, and that's kind of what socialism is, right? It's like workers of the world unite. We need to overcome this class-based dictatorship and implement, governments that represent, the working class majority instead of a government that represents the oligarch minority. And if we did that, we would realize that we're not interested in war. We're not interested in colonizing and raping. We're interested in peace through mutual prosperity, win-win trade, and respecting the sovereignty of other societies and celebrating the differences, celebrating our, cultural and genetic differences. So, but I don't see, I see that as progress. I see the antithesis to that as our history, where it's been, guided and dictated by a ruling oligarchy who utilizes, cynically exploits differences, genetic differences, cynically exploits, differences in gender, right? Sexual orientation. They exploit these things for their own malign interests of maintaining themselves as the ruling class and making sure that the working class is divided and unable to unite and hold them accountable, hold them responsible for their criminality, for all the things that they're doing that are not in the interest of humanity, that are not in the interest of the vast majority of people in any given country. I mean, so to me, that's really everything. Like that's it. Nothing comes close. We want to look at our skin color and say, oh man, that really makes me happy to see this paleness. And then when I look at somebody who's not pale, I get angry. Like they're not white. Like I don't understand the hyperfixation at all on any of that. I think that's, again, something we really need to move past, mentally speaking, like it's a way of thinking. It's a hyperfixation that is not leading to any kind of improvement or progress, which you can only get through understanding, again, the historic reality, which will lead us to what is going on now, which will then give us an inkling as to how to progress. But
so you, rant. Yeah, you're doing great. So where do morals come from? Because this whole idea that we have good and evil, this is right, this is wrong. Where do morals come from, Billy Bob?
I mean, morality is obviously subjective as far as how they're discerned. Like there's subjectivity in their discernment. I mean, we don't want to argue.
Where does it come from, though? What decides what's moral and what's not?
This is philosophy. I mean, and it's a philosophical question. And I think there's different answers to that question. And one answer is there's an eternal being, who is the creator of everything. That's one answer. And I think there's other plausible explanations that don't include necessarily a supernatural, eternal being. But no, I love getting into philosophy, and I've discovered that, you cannot, I'm definitely not a moral relativist. And I've discovered that, I do believe that there is a concrete morality, but I would say that the way people figure what that out is very highly subjective, and it's highly influenced by circumstances and the environment.
Yeah. So what would be those circumstances in your environment that would determine what your moral views are? That's what I'm asking.
I mean, everything.
Would it be ethnicity? Would it be so Andrew Breitbart, I'm not sure if you're familiar, he created the Breitbart organization, the publication. He had a quote that said, politics is downstream from culture. Okay. And then I would expand and say culture is downstream from religion. And I'd say morals come from the culture. The culture dictates what is right and wrong, what you prioritize, how you see the world, how you view history. But then I'd say your culture, the culture is dictated by the religion. Okay. So if we have a common religion amongst a group of people, there's the Muslims and Christians and Jews and Hindus, they all have a different moral compass, and it's dictated by their religion. I forget where I was even going with this now. I had you had some good points that I wanted to address, but
where do morals come from? I mean, was your primary question.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think there's not an objective answer. Like, it's a philosophical question, and there's many different philosophies that try to explain that. And you're suggesting that, I said it's shaped by your environment, and you said what specifically about the environment, and then you point to things like your religious environment, of course, is true, your cultural environment. I mean, these are all things that shape people's minds and shape the ideas of what morality is in people's minds. That's true. And so progress for me, in which we don't engage in exploitation of other humans, we don't celebrate stealing things from them or exploiting them. To me, that's a good, that would be considered improvement. But then maybe to some cultures that wouldn't be an improvement, because depending on your religion or depending on your culture, you might think that other people exist to be exploited and stolen from. But I'm not sure if that was what you were trying to say. I mean, I think I probably have the majority of humanity probably agrees with me on what constitutes progress. And I think the majority of humans probably agree that colonialism, neocolonialism, superpowered nations exploiting and extracting wealth and resources from poor nations. Like, I think there's a large majority of humans that would agree with me that progress would mean to limit that as much as we can and bring that process to an end, bring that practice to an end. So, I mean, it's hard to, you have to just kind of go with what is popular. Like, I have to appeal to basic common sense ideas of morality and what progress looks like. And I think, most humans would agree that these are basically bad things, and we want to promote human flourishing. So even without talking about an eternal being, I think there's all kinds of moral positions that people have large agreement on. And so to me, it's an open question exactly where morals come from. I'm not sure I have the objective truth on that question, but I don't need to. I don't need to convince people that we can do better than our current system, to look at our current system and see where the problems are, and to see how we should fix what are the problems. And progress would mean addressing these particular problems. And how do we do that? What are the obstacles to progress? The obstacles to progress are the pedophile elites. Like, these are the obstacles of progress, because to them, there is no such thing as progress. They have achieved the apex of society. Society could not be any better. They go around doing what they want to who they want, when they want to do it. And they want to maintain that privilege. And they are going to resist, and they're going to fight against anyone saying, hey, let's change this system so it works better for most people. They're going to say, like, fuck no, we will fucking kill you. We will kill Martin Luther King because he wanted us to, see individuals as individuals and not as, just ethnicities. And so that's not going to serve our interests. So they're going to resist. They're going to resist improvement because, again, from their perspective, things could not be better. And that's why they hate China, because China represents vast improvement for humanity, for the planet. That's why they hate Russia, because Russia says, we're going to maintain our sovereignty, and you are not going to come into our country and, extract all of the wealth and own our wealth and own our government. That's just not going to happen. Sorry. Iran is saying the same thing. Venezuela was trying to resist until what just happened. But I mean, so that's what's going on. That's what's important. So it's the struggle against Western imperialism. It's the struggle against the West's efforts to, you know, maintain their global hegemony and control every market, resource, and government on the planet. So that's the primary contradiction in the 21st century, and that's how the class struggle plays out. Because if what is the interest of the united global working class? It's to, you know, maintain sovereignty in individual states, to not let this Western empire control the planet and to control every resource in their malign interest. Because then we'd get a whole bunch of we get even more Epstein shit. We would get even more Epstein bullshit, and that would be the reality if the resistance fails.
Yeah, but let's go back to this whole idea that everything is materialism here, and we eliminate the ethnic dynamic to this understanding of the present day or history. You don't the morals, like I was saying, the morals come from the culture. The culture is dictated by the religion. For the most part, there might be some universal principles that everyone around the world can agree with, but we're really products of our environment, and if our environment is a certain way, that's the way we're going to think. I don't think you can remove the fact that Epstein was in a Jewish cabal. The people, these pedophile elites, they're from every background, every different color, but the people that was facilitating this pedophilic elite are from a single background predominantly. Look at everyone around Epstein. It's obviously an Israeli operation. The way he speaks to everyone. The last time we spoke, I pointed out the Noam Chomsky thing. What does Noam Chomsky have in common with Epstein? Okay, what is this darling sweetheart of the left that I grew up reading have to do with Epstein? Why is he emailing him saying, what can I do to help fix your image? How can we rehabilitate your image? The only thing I see that connects the two is their ethnic identity. I don't think you can remove that. When you look at you're a Russia man. I love Putin. I think Putin is standing up to Western imperialism and the oligarchs that run this country. What happened whenever the Soviet Union, right before it fell, they start privatizing and they do shock therapy? Who ends up owning all the resources of Russia? I think it was like 7 bankers or something that ended up owning. Are you familiar with this? 7 bankers owning like 60% of the economy. Does that sound right?
The 7 bankers, 6 were of Jewish descent. Most of them eventually faced criminal charges and fled to Western countries. That is true.
But
yes,
correct. And then there were more oligarchs as well. And Putin had multiple sit downs with them, and he said, "Listen, this is how we're going to play ball here. You're either going to be loyal to me in this nation, and you're going to listen to me, or you're going to be imprisoned or kicked out." And who were the guys that stayed and played ball, and who were the guys that left and fled? It was primarily, I'm not going to say all, because it definitely wasn't all, but it was primarily the ethnic Russians, the Slavic oligarchs that stayed, and then the Jewish oligarchs left. And I believe it was the same thing in Ukraine at around that same time, where over like 50% of the economy is being ran by a handful of small Jewish oligarchs. And I don't think you can remove that ethnic dynamic in understanding the history of the world or politics. And it's all over the West. The 3 richest individuals in Australia currently are all Jewish billionaires. And Australia is dealing with a lot of the same things that America's dealing with. They're imprisoning people for anti-Semitism. Something as simple as I don't know, saying, why are there so many Jews in government? Boom, straight to jail. That you can't remove that. And right. Oh wait, and
Okay.
I know I'm rambling. We never actually addressed the Elon Musk thing the last time we spoke. But it had nothing to do with Israel. So Elon Musk, he's on Twitter. A guy says Jews are the number one purporters of white hatred in the West. And Elon Musk responds and he said the actual truth. That is a very benign tweet, and he just agreed with the tweet. Because of that tweet, all of Elon Musk's advertisers pull out. Giant media campaigns that Elon Musk is a Nazi because he responded to this single tweet. He's forced to go not to Israel, he's forced to go to Poland, to Auschwitz, and watch a Auschwitz movie or slideshow with like Ben Shapiro and some Israeli official. So it had nothing to do with Israel at the time. It had to do with the ethnicity of the people he was speaking of. And that whole idea that doesn't exist in any other group. If I'm speaking about crime in America, and I happen to acknowledge that the majority of certain crimes are perpetrated by certain groups of people, there's a commonality when it comes to skin color. I can say that without repercussion. There's no problem. I'm not getting media campaigns against me for saying that. They won't send me to Africa to watch Hotel Rwanda to remind me how bad Black people have had it in the past. But when it comes to specifically Jews, that is something that is across the West is happening, and you can't separate that from the understanding or understate how important that is. And the power's going out again, but.
Well, guys, we are 2 hours in. I think we should start wrapping up, mainly because I need to pee, but also because we're 2 hours in.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. But I want to get the last word. I should get the last word.
You should get the last word.
Yes, get the last word in.
Well, so again, I just think that to be clear about, our relative positions, because I think a lot of times our positions are going past each other, and and you're making your case as if, we can't discount this. We can't ignore it. And again, I don't think I'm ignoring it. I think I'm properly contextualizing it. And I think what you're, again, we have agreement on Jewish overrepresentation. And so when I say that, and then you say I'm ignoring it, it makes me think that you're not listening to me, or you're not processing what I'm saying, because that's the opposite of ignoring it. Acknowledging it. I'm saying it's real. I'm just saying that there is nuance, and that disproportion exists within a system of oligarchy. And it's not just, a certain ethnic oligarchy that is running roughshod over the interests of the majority of the oligarchs. Now, you say, no, they are running roughshod over the interests of the non-Jewish oligarchs. And here's the proof. Elon Musk, he says one thing against them, and all of a sudden he's kissing the wall. And I can see how that is, compelling in a certain way, and how it could cause one to believe this is exactly what's going on. But to me, it's not compelling, and it's not convincing, because I think the reality is far different. And so I think, there's overlapping interests with the ethnic Jewish billionaires who identify as Jewish, and then all the other billionaires, and most billionaires aren't Jewish. And so, I don't see a ethnic war taking place within the billionaire class. What I see is an overlapping of interests and a convergence on a strategy for global domination. And in the Middle East, that strategy is predicated on Israel. And any kind of ideas that suggest that we shouldn't do that are denounced, because ideas that oppose using Israel as our hegemonic vehicle in the Middle East are against imperialism. And so the non-Jewish people are happy to have these anti-Semitism laws, because it's protecting what they see as their best strategy for global domination. You know what I'm saying? And so it's not like there's any pushback on this strategy from the oligarchs, from the billionaires. There's a convergence, and therefore these anti-Semitism laws again are not opposed by the rest of the non-Jewish billionaires. They're just not. And why? Because we want to tampen criticism of Israel. We want to conflate criticism of Israel with criticism of Jews. We want to say that if we criticize Israel, we're going to have another Holocaust, and we have to shut those people up. All of this is in service to the ultimate, oligarch, their drive for global domination. And in the Middle East, that involves supporting Israel and using Israel as their vehicle. So I just don't see that there's an ethnic conflict taking place within the ruling class where you've got the good billionaires fighting for good white people, and you got the Jewish billionaires fighting. So the Jewish billionaires aren't fighting for Jewish people. The Jewish billionaires are fighting for their billionaire interests. And, I think like a lot of Jewish people who oppose Israel, I agree with them. Like Israel is not something that's good. Zionism is not something good for Jewish people. Zionism is a racist, abhorrent ideology, like the UN, declared to be true in the 70s. It's a racist ideology predicated on, ethnic cleansing and land theft and colonialism. And so, and a lot of people who are Jewish are the loudest champions of this truth. Obviously, because of the Holocaust, because of a history of anti-Semitism, even in this country, right? So, rich Jews couldn't join WASP country clubs for a long time, right? So there was legitimate anti-Semitism. And so, like, I get why people who are Jewish largely endorse the state of Israel. It appeals to them. We need our own state, because we don't know when the non-Jews are going to turn on us again, and we need our state where we can be safe. Like, I get it. It's abhorrent, but I get that kind of tribalism. But it's just not the driver of, U.S. foreign policy or Western imperialism. The driver is it's a class thing. Anyway. I'm glad I get the last word, Daryl. Nah.
I have so much to say right now. No.
You can. I got time.
No. Just I would just say I'm not actually opposed to the idea of Zionism. Surprisingly so. I'm opposed to the way that it's been implemented. So I'm all about free association and self-determination. So if groups of people that have commonalities want to get together, form communities, form countries, whatever it is, I have zero problem. I see zero moral wrong with that idea. The problem with Israel, obviously, is the genocide, is the land, is how they're obviously controlling our government and governments around the world. So the idea that I'm not necessarily opposed to, say, an ethno-state. I'm opposed to when that ethno-state displaces other people. And yeah, but I had so much more with what you were going on there, but we can end it there. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no, it's a good, exchange of ideas. And, again, I want to get better at it. I want to, get better at, drilling down to the core things and really just, really good substantive communication. And it's a challenge. It takes effort. And so the more practice I get, the better. We should probably let Ian P. We're so sorry to cause this distress to your bladder, but yeah, no, we'll do this again. There's a lot to say, and it's again, it's I think it can be beneficial to have these kind of disagreements in a civil and enjoyable way, because if we're not enjoying ourselves doing this talk, like, what's the point? So I hope I wasn't too verbose. I can be, and I hope you guys are all happy with what you got to say, even though I am getting the last word right now. So we will reconvene probably Tuesday, me and Ian at least, and Daryl, we'll reconvene some Sunday that you're available in the future. All right.
Sounds good. Appreciate y'all.
All right.
Okay.